Welcome to Brent Locked In. This is a video interview series that will see the likes of myself and other young people from Brent talk to some pretty remarkable individuals that are lucky enough to call Brent their home. This series is taking place as part of Brent's year as Borough of Culture. My name is Savannah and I've lived in Kingsbury my entire life and I'm very lucky to call Brent my home. A few weeks ago, I was able to chat to Marilyn Okoro, a runner who has won medals in the likes of the Olympics and the World Athletic Championships. Marilyn grew up in Stonebridge and is very, very proud to be a Brent native. So, Marilyn, obviously we're all in lockdown at the moment. It's a crazy testing time for everyone, but how have you personally been finding the lockdown?
So lockdown for me, I've actually navigated it really well so far. It's, a time of uncertainty and, we've never experienced anything like this, but I feel like mentally I've been really prepared. Being an athlete, it's quite similar to the lifestyle you would have if you were training full time. You'd go and do your training and you spend a lot of time in isolation. So it's important that you guard your mind and just have things in place that are going to see you through, staying connected with your community and your support networks, and keeping the mind active and keeping the body active, and being just really organized, prepared. I work part-time as well as do my training for a charity called the Brick. So working in social care makes you realize it's a job of real sense of purpose, and I'm supporting the homeless community here in Wigan. So that keeps me distracted and also helps me get out. But it also makes me very thankful. I do really miss my family down in Willesden, but I check in with my mum, my sister, my brother every day, and just doing the best I can and just taking it day by day and staying in the moment has been two things that I've really, really had to lean on in this time.
I guess in terms of the lockdown, like for a lot of us, we had plans, we had things, we wanted to achieve this year or accomplish, and it's kind of now been thrown out the window. So I'm intrigued to know what you had planned prior to the lockdown for this year.
Absolutely. So I just keep saying, look, Maz, the goalposts may have moved, but the goals don't have to. So prior to this, I was all gung-ho for my comeback season to athletics. I've had a few seasons of start-stops and getting injuries or financial difficulties, and I just felt like I'd put things in place. I'd moved up to Wigan, got my new training regime, and I was really trying to come out with a bang, and then they said Tokyo's cancelled. But it's a bit of a blessing in disguise. So, I just take things for what they are and, draw the lessons from them and keep focused forward. I think personally, would I have been 100% ready to be my best athlete self at those times? I'm not sure, but I've been given the blessing of more time. So I just have to keep working diligently towards 2021, which is what I'm doing now. But yeah, it's crazy unprecedented times. And I think sometimes people can be so regimented or so used to what they always have done. But with athletics or sport, an injury can come at any time. And you can't really dwell on it because that does not help you. It just spirals you into a place of worry and anxiety. So it's important that we just, accept it for what it is, stay safe, do all the things that we're supposed to do, and just get yourself ready for when the doors open again. And, we embrace that new normal when we get there.
So let's talk a bit about growing up in Stonebridge. So obviously, I'm really intrigued actually to hear about what it was like growing up in Stonebridge in the 80s. Because for me, I grew up in Kingsbury, but I was born in 1997, so it's a completely different time. I love Stonebridge so much. I'm really excited to hear from you, how you found it growing up in Stonebridge.
I always used to think, Kingsbury's the posh bit. My cousins live there, so I used to love going to Colindale, and they went to Kingsbury High. I used to love going there for the weekend. Coming from Stonebridge Estate, Kingsbury was the posh bit to us. So I literally, we started off, Asda in Wembley, the big Asda. That used to be Chalk Hill Estate. So that's kind of my first earliest memories. And it was a really rough estate. I remember getting mugged there. We lived on the 44th floor, which was so high. And I just remember my mum being mugged at knife point, and they ransacked the flat. I must have been about 3 or 4 at the time. My mum I don't know what she did, but she's a bit of a fighter, this woman, and that's where I feel like I get a lot of my strength from. And she just single. She was pregnant with my brother and just managed to kind of fend them off. Quite a, you know, traumatic experience to remember, as, you know, as a young thing, but it stayed to me. I'm 35 now. But I also, you know, I spent time in care. My foster parents are from there as well. So I just have memories of playing out. You could do that then. I learned to ride a bike outside and just having your little groups. You go knock for each other. And, you know, my aunt lived in Alperton, so there was just lots of community around us. And I just remember summer holidays were the best time ever, just playing out. And from the start of the morning all day until your mum called you in. But I can't lie, it was, you know, my upbringing was pretty tough. I'm Nigerian. My mum's, you know, she's had a hard life and she's just done the best she could for us. And sometimes that's, you know, it's not how I would want my children to have to suffer, but it definitely has made me tough. It's definitely given me the strength of character I've needed, not just for my athletics, but, you know, whatever life is going to throw at you. As any eldest child in any sort of black home, really, you get a lot of responsibility put on your shoulders early. So I've got 2 other siblings, my bro and my sis. So I had a big hand to play in their upbringing as well. But I just had this thing in me that I just knew there was something I was going to do with all this pain. Obviously at that, you know, young age, you don't really realize that's what's making you into who you are. But I just thought there's so much out there and I'm determined to grab it. So my dad's always lived in America, always been a distant figure from me. But he did send me to boarding school, which I went to school in Willesden Green, Gladstone Park. That was my primary school. And I remember telling my teacher that, and this was in year 5, that, oh, you know, my dad wants me to go to boarding school. And to us, it seemed like a bad place. Like, oh my gosh, if you go to boarding school, you've done something wrong. But also at the same time, my mum wasn't trying to send me to Nigeria, so I thought it couldn't be that bad. And I remember looking at the videos and it was just so different to what I knew. Like, you know, when you grow up in a city, you just know concrete and there's not much greenery and, you know, you have everything you need is on your doorstep. You can just, you know, the cash and carry, the chip shop, all that stuff. And I just felt like it just seems so derelict and like it's pretty, but it was so not what I was used to. And I remember going to visit and there was like this big long driveway and I sat the exams and I got in, and I just remember preparing and having my last day at Gladstone Park and a group of kids came and they were just like, oh, so you think you're better than us now, you're leaving us. I think that's the first time I realized you have to really focus on your goals and not let other people dictate who you are and what you do. Because for me, that was like a big opportunity to find out what my purpose in life was. And that's really where I discovered my running and met my first coach. And he was brilliant. You know, he said, you have to use anything you've been through, all your adversity. And I used to be a bit shy to tell people where I came from. I remember one day telling a girl, because I felt like I was kind of caught in 2 worlds, because obviously I'd go there in the term time and in the holidays I'd come back. And when I came back, everyone was like, oh, you think you're different? Why do you talk like that? And then over there, I was just kind of a bit shy to tell. But I told people earlier, because I remember one girl said, oh, where do you live in London? And I said, oh, not too far from here. I said, Stonebridge Estate. And she was like, oh, how many acres do you have? And I was like, it's not that kind of estate, girl. And I joke with her to this day. But, you know, fortunately for me, back in the day when I went to school, you know, material things weren't the be all and end all. And I'm just, you know, really thankful for that. I went to school with some really genuine girls. There was a small school. There was only 20 of us in my year, which was like at Gladstone Park in year 5, there was like 40 of us in a class. So I got that nurturing, I got that, you know, attention, but I definitely felt like I was like in 2 worlds, and it was important for me to always own who I was. And, you know, I always say, anytime I'm talking to groups at schools or whatever, I always say Stonebridge, those are the streets that made me who I am, and I'm always proud. And it's definitely given me that thick skin, so I'm really grateful. And there's so much talent that's come out of Stonebridge as well. So I am, you know, when I look back on it, it's like I'm really proud, because like you were saying, in the 80s, people were there was so much talent in the air. And it was just like, we just need to do something with it. So I'm very thankful to my coach for recognizing that I had talent. I may not have had the support network, and he decided to be that for me. So yeah.
There's a lot of stuff you just said that we're definitely going to touch up on. But what I wanted to ask you is just, obviously, your mum moving from Nigeria to London, how did she end up in Stonebridge? Like, how did that even come about?
So she found herself in London to study nursing. And her sister, her elder sister, came before her, and she was working in the Heinz factory, which was in now Park Royal area. I was also born in Central Middlesex Hospital, so I guess that's kind of how she ended up in Brent. And then when she fell pregnant with me, I was born in Central Middlesex Hospital, so she just never left Brent. If you talk about leaving Brent now, she won't. She's had a lot of support from the MPs over the years. We went to Harlesden Methodist Church, so we're really rooted, like Harlesden High Street. Like, it was breaking my heart yesterday watching a piece on the news about the corona situation, but I'm glad they're highlighting it, because we need as much support as we can. But yeah, that's just, my mum is just Brent through and through. She'll never leave. My sister's been quite poorly, as has my brother, over the years, so the support we've got through our local authority has just been invaluable to us. So yeah, it's a great borough. A lot of time for them.
Yeah, and also let's talk a bit about boarding school, because like you said, like I can imagine moving from Stonebridge to, it was Stowe School you went to, right?
First of all, I went to a little school called Abbots Hill, which was in Hemel Hempstead, which wasn't that far. Yeah, so at the time, because my mum always takes the streets, she doesn't like to go. She could have just jumped on the M1, but no, she was like going through Harrow and all this stuff. I felt like it was so far away, whereas now I could probably get there in about 25 minutes. But when you're young, things seem so far. So that was my first experience of boarding school, and then it finished at 16, so I went to another one to do my A-levels.
Okay, so I want to talk a bit to you about Stowe School, just because from like my research of it, it seems so prestigious. Like the likes of Richard Branson went there, Chelsea Davy, Henry Cavill, like that is a stellar alumni. So I'm just wondering, like, going from Stonebridge to that school, did you ever feel like you had to basically play two characters?
What a stellar. I know, I like that you dropped Henry Cavill in there, because like it needs to make me, but anyway, we'll get onto that later. So by Stowe, I feel like I had developed a really strong awareness of who I was, and I'm so glad I did, because that is a very prestigious school. It has a lot of history. There was so much going on, and also I just didn't I wasn't fazed by the people I was mixing with, because half the time I didn't really know what socialite meant. My head of house was Chloe Delavine from the Delavine family. So I just, they just accepted me as me, and I was just very proud of who I was. I was a little bit older then, but I definitely feel this whole dual personality when I was at Abbots Hill. And in those years, from 10 years old to 16, I really was developing that bravery to be able to say, actually, this is who I am. And I think because I had such a small year group and we were encouraged to do everything. It really was like, we were the lacrosse team, we were the tennis team, you had to be good at academics, we were in the debate team. So I got to try and develop my skills and build my confidence in a lot, but running was my thing, and running was the thing that everyone knew me for. And it almost didn't matter that, oh, actually, you're not as wealthy as us from, you're from a council estate, but because I was such a good runner, I was best in the school, best in the county, best, I was representing our nation. It almost blinded everyone, and I felt like that gave me my sense of belonging. And actually, it doesn't matter where you come from or what you go through or how much money you have. It's what you're going to do with your talent and how you're going to achieve your goals. So by the time I got to Stowe, I was pretty much established. I managed to get, I would never really have afforded it. So I managed to get a scholarship because of my running. My dad was obviously, he paid for everything, but little did I know he was having his problems. And I remember getting a letter saying, you needed to top up with this amount. And I was like, oh, gosh. But education is really important in an African home. So, my mum wanted me to be a lawyer or doctor. Let's put that one out there. She hated me running. So I managed to apply for a scholarship to top up the amount that I needed to pay. But I was really driven that I wanted to, one, prove to my mum that I could excel in the classroom. I could also, by this time I was thinking about a career in it. This could be a career. I could make it to the Olympics. So then it was a challenge. Could I prove her wrong? Could I prove any doubters wrong? But I always felt it when, you do have those kind of gaps. And I felt like I was trying to keep up with other people, and it was just a situation where they want to go on these fancy holidays. But thankfully I had my running that would be like, okay, well, I can't afford to go that anyway, but actually I can use this time and really develop my craft, and maybe I've got a competition to do anyway. So yeah, it was tough. I definitely felt like I was in between worlds at time. And even when I came back home, by then there was sort of a, okay, do you really belong here now? Like, you're going off and you think you're better than us and things like that. And I was like, no, I never forget where I come from. And, you know, in the holidays, I come back to this 2-bed flat, and my mum doesn't care. She's going to have me sweeping the floors and doing all the chores I had to do before. So yeah, it was kind of a conflicting time.
Yeah.
So it was really important that I, you know, knew who I was, and established that, so that I didn't just get blown here, there, and everywhere.
And, you know, you spoke about being in care, and also when you went to these schools, because you had this amazing talent, it kind of changed people's perception of you in terms of they weren't going to be as judgy. But do you find that the stuff you went through prior to going to these schools, for example, being in care, not having your dad around, that actually shaped you to have that confidence and that self-belief to say, do you know what, yeah, I don't come from the same background, but I belong here just as much as you?
100%. Yeah, I just feel like I've been very independent from a very young age, and it just created this. You can almost have a bit of like, I'm a bit rogue, so no one can tell me anything, mentality. But I'm not a confrontational person either. So it also had its kind of negative aspects, and sometimes I wouldn't speak up, but I would just go off and do my own thing. But sometimes I needed to have those communications because it would actually cause problems later down the line. But in terms of how people saw me, sometimes I just felt like, you know, if people are going to be really superficial like that, I don't need them in my world anyway. But at the end of the day, this is what I have to offer, and this is what I bring to the table, and I know what that's worth and what that means. So yeah.
And then in terms of your running, you spoke that you had a coach when you was at school who was really influential in like pushing you to do it. But how did you even get into running? Like, what led up to that moment where you found out, do you know what, I'm actually good at this?
So basically, at school, we played a game called Lacrosse. And I don't know, for those that don't know what it is, it's basically like hockey in the air. So you have a long stick and it's got a net at the end, and it's a team sport. And it's called the boundaryless game. So basically, you can run everywhere. So it suited me really, really well. And I loved it. And I thought, I'd never heard of it before. Obviously, I'd heard of netball and things like that. But I was trying loads of things for the first time. And this was something I just loved because there was a bit of aggression in it as well. And I remember my PE teacher just saying, oh, you're a really good runner. You need to go to running club. And I was just like, what kind of sentence is that? I am a really good runner, so why do I need to go to running club? And I just remember thinking, oh, I've seen the girls at running club. They just run up and down the pitch. I hate mud, by the way. You know, I'm a city girl. I hate and then obviously the British weather as well. So I just remember it was on a Friday and it was winter season, but I loved lacrosse and I didn't like letting people down. And so I thought, okay, I'll just go along. I'll just try one. At least I can say I've tried, and then I don't have to go again. Little did I know, I met George Harrison, who is my coach, and his wife was a dinner lady, and so he came in externally to run running clubs on Fridays, and he made us run up and down the lacrosse pitches in the rain. And I thought, what is this? This is so rubbish. But I thought it was going to make me better for my lacrosse. So whatever was going to make me better, I'll apply myself. And he pulled me aside one day, and he could tell, like, because it's very obvious, because I'm at 400 and 800 runner. When a distance is too much for me, my whole body will just tell you, and like everything just sinks, and you can tell I don't want to be there. So he was pulling me aside, and he was like, "You don't have to be here. Your dorm is literally 100 meters away." And he said, "You know, you're really talented, but you know, in this life, hard work will outdo talent that doesn't want to work hard." And he said, "You've got enough talent to go to the Olympics." And I just thought that was really ringing in my ear, and I was like, Olympics. And these times I didn't really watch a lot of sport. I didn't really watch a lot of TV, to be honest. But I did remember the Serena and Venus, and I remember thinking, God, I want to be like them. And who else has been to the Olympics? There's a few of us now, but at the time I was like, no one else has been to the Olympics from my area. So that was I thrive off challenges. So it's like, if you tell me, one, I can't do something, or if you set something that seems impossible, I want to try and smash it. So, and also I felt like he was a bit disappointed that I was being lazy in that session, and he's just someone that has just advocated for me for so much. I mean, he's in his 90s now, so so I have a lot of respect for George, and I just thought, you know what, let me see if I can get to the Olympics.
Yeah.
So I was 10 years old, and I just remember that seed had been planted. However, told you about my mum, right?
Yep.
I remember, oh, mommy bless her, she jokes about it now, but at the time it wasn't funny. So she hated it. She said, I didn't send you to school to run, read your book. And the whole time, my dad's a doctor, my mum's in nursing, I was supposed to be a doctor or a lawyer. So this just seemed to crush her heart. But now as an adult, I can understand it, because there's no security in, a career in sport. Anything can happen. There's politics, there's injury. It's just, you might not have the right networks. So she was really she was really confused, like all that money your dad's spending and you want to run around in circles. She wasn't happy at all. But George used to come in the holidays, he would come from Watford to Stonebridge, pick me up, take me to training, and bring me back afterwards. When I was older, I would go on the train because there's that North London line. So he really made sure I stayed in the sport. He didn't understand it at first because he thought I was just being lazy. I'd go home, my mum wouldn't let me train. She was like, it's too dangerous, you can't go running on the streets. And she was right. Like sometimes I'd sneak out and, you got the guys bunning weed on the wall, and I'm like going for a run and they're going, hey, runner, come here. And I was like, run back in the house. So I was coming back in turn time a little bit unfit. And then obviously my mum's cooking Niger food. So he was like, what's going on? So he came and visited. And oh my God, my mum, the way she shouted at this man, it's embarrassing to this day. She's embarrassed. She knows she did wrong. She didn't understand it. It's like now I see like how involved parents are. We're just trying to survive. So she's like, why are you coming to my house? My daughter's young. Where do you think you're taking her? So the school were fantastic. They invited her up for a meeting and they explained, I think I just had sports day and like smashed all the records, and they're like, she's really talented and this is the exact environment for someone like her where she can thrive. We will make sure she stays on top of her academics, but it's important that you have extracurricular. I loved singing. I was in the choir. It was the first time I did like a school production that year, because I didn't even really know I could sing. I just went for an audition and she was like, sing this. So it's important that, and I always advocate that kids do take part in as much as you can and find what you're passionate about. Yeah. So eventually we managed to calm mummy down and she just allowed it. She just said, you better get your grades. And obviously when I made my first Olympics, she was finally happy that I could be an athlete. I was like, that standard is high.
That is the reality of a lot of Black families, though. Like, they have the vision of where they want you to be, and sometimes, especially when it comes to stuff creative or sports, they don't get that there is actually some value in it, and if you are good, you can make it.
Yeah, that's it. But then, like, so now I will joke with her, and I was like, imagine if you supported me earlier, and she'll just be like, well, if I didn't give you that, that fight and that hunger and that drive, would you be where you are today? And I'm just like, okay, lady. I get it.
And talking a bit about George as well, because obviously you said that your dad wasn't in your life. So in that sense, it sounds to me like George kind of played that early primitive father figure in your life, because, he was dropping you to training and picking you up, which, if your dad was there, he would have been doing. So did you kind of regard George as a father figure in your life at that point?
Oh, 100%. So I think I'd probably go to my foster dad first. He was the first kind of... So I was fostered at age 7 and till 9.5, 2.5 years. Me and my brother went into care, and I just loved my foster dad. But I think it's because I'd never grown up with a male in the house, and he was just he was firm, but he was playful, so funny. And this was for me the first time I thought, oh my gosh, men aren't scary. Like they're all right. And he taught me how to ride a bike for the first time. So he sadly passed away, but I went back to live with my mum at 9, and then going to school pretty soon after that. To have George step in, that was amazing and such a blessing, and he really, really nurtured. And I think I don't really even, at the time you just go with it and you're just like, I was really grateful. But looking back now, he really was that link that made sure I didn't fall through the gap. Because, I could have just finished school and be like, okay, that's it now. But he just made sure I kept at it. And every time, he would give me pocket money, and that was like something like I would just struggle in silence. Like if I couldn't afford something, I wouldn't whine about it. You just can't have it. Like I see people sometimes they can't afford something, and it's like, okay, either work for it or you just simply can't have it. And that I learned that very early, because, there's a lot we couldn't afford. And it was about getting what you needed, not necessarily what you wanted. But George would just be like, here, take this, go and get those new spikes. go and get those trainers. And it was things that I knew that I needed to do, to perform as best I could. But he recognized that, and he didn't make me feel uncomfortable. So I really learned to trust him, that he had my best interest at heart, because he was putting himself on the line, and putting his money on the line as well, and just took me under his wing. So definitely an amazing, and still to this day, one of the biggest role models I have.
So just thinking a bit about, or talking a bit about the Olympics. So obviously I can imagine working towards 2008 was a massive thing for you. Can you just tell us a little bit about the run up to that? So how did you prepare? Did you have any like rituals before the game? Like what happened?
So by this time I was kind of established into a full-time athlete lifestyle. I went to Bath Uni, and that was kind of what, my last year I really got put on the athletics map, really. So I had a different coach by then. It seemed just so professional. I just feel like my lead up to the Olympics was pretty whirlwindy, because it was like, as soon as I was on the international scene, I had 2 years, and then it was the Olympics, and my times were just crazy dropping. But that's what we planned for. It's like a 4-year cycle, and I kind of came in at 2 years out, so it was just so much momentum. Is this really going to happen? I wouldn't, already I was in a pretty regimented training routine. So it was about just making sure I was ticking off everything I needed to do, making sure I was eating right, making sure I didn't miss any sessions, making sure I was listening to my body as well, getting all the treatment. Fortunately for me, I was under the umbrella of funding. So lottery funding supports British athletics. I think it was UK athletics then. So I didn't really have a lot to worry about, just making sure I showed up, which is, amazing. And I did, and I was, this young black talent. There was no other, Kelly Holmes had retired, but then I felt like I was the next one stepping in as far as representing the black community. But I was different because I looked like a sprinter. I'm very muscular, Ebo genetics. And I felt that was something I had to navigate in terms of my acceptance on the British team. So to make the Olympics outright, I ran the time, I won the trials. There was no stone left unturned, and that was so important for me, because that's a separate battle that us black athletes have to face in sport as well. And I just didn't want to give anyone any leeway to include any politics or anything like that. So it was a very exciting, your first Olympics, there's no feeling like it. And to think, I'm going to China, like, wow. I remember when I just used to walk up and down the A40 and take my brother and sister to that Hindu temple, because it was so exciting to us. And now I'm just traveling the world. So it was amazing. Really, really, really fond memories of that championships.
And then just, you touched a bit upon like being a black athlete, especially in that time, like you said, Kelly Holmes had just retired. There wasn't that many black people representing, you really were one of a kind for that Olympics. So can you just tell us a bit about did you face any challenges that maybe people were, outrightly racist, or did you face any sort of challenges to your obstacles because of your skin color, or did you find that it wasn't as bad as you maybe would have envisioned it to be?
I think there were a lot of black athletes on the British team, but they were sprinters. So everyone just assumed you're black and muscly, you're fast, so you should be a sprinter. Whereas I was both. I fell into the 400 and 800 category. And also there wasn't, I think there's Abiel Yepetan, who's from Northwest, and she again was a sprinter. So I think people used to confuse her and me when they see me on the streets. So I found it difficult coming into the endurance scene, British athletics, because they didn't know what to do with me. I wasn't like anyone they'd ever encountered before. How can she run so fast, yet she's strong enough to run 800? And that was a real battle. Like I think at the time when I was young, you're just trying to just smash times. But then when things are difficult and you realize actually there's a lot of people that don't want you to win and aren't really rooting for you. So I had to really prove I deserve to be there. And for a lot of years, I dominated the rankings, and I was the best 800-meter runner we had. But I had to fight so much harder than my white counterparts. And that's something that I try and advocate to change. And then just in general, just the welfare of athletes. If you're from a background where you may not have the support system of your parents, or have people just reaching out to sponsor you, it's really difficult. That's the journey I've had to navigate. And I'm just astounded how little welfare care there is for athletes that are from, you know, perhaps not the most of affluent of areas.
And in terms of obstacles that you face just in general, maybe during the Olympics and post-Olympics, could you tell us a bit about that? So your journey, you know, overcoming those challenges.
So I would say the first 6 years of my career, so from 2006 to 2012, it's a dream, you know, it's amazing, you know, coming from Stonebridge, having this amazing education, catapulted into the international scene is literally a fairy tale. But, you know, the journey and the stories really begin when things kind of almost start to crumble. And I think after 2012, I had a really difficult year in terms of, you know, it was the home Olympics and there was a lot of politics around my selection. And this is what I mean about, you know, kind of having to battle with my white counterparts, because I felt like I was penalized for something that perhaps if I wasn't Black wouldn't have been such a big deal. So bouncing back from that, I decided to move to America. I'm pretty nomadic. I move a lot, whatever it takes to achieve my goals. But I feel like looking back, that was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to the politics around athletics. After every championships, you're going to be on a bit of a down. So I recommend that people do not make decisions out of emotion. But, you know, every season will have its lessons and its blessings. And I learned a lot when I went out to America. It reminded me of, you know, growing up and grafting and making your voice heard, because, you know, Americans are outspoken and they're confident. You know, why should anyone believe in you if you don't believe in yourself? And it was just literally, it's almost like sometimes when you take a step, you know, away from what you've been submerged in and you look back, you have a different perspective. And I felt like, okay, wow, like I need to get that fight, that Stonebridge lion heart back, and not run away, basically. So I came back and decided, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I definitely decided I wanted to talk more about my story, share the struggles, be real with it, because that's the only way we can change it for someone else, and also help other people. And that's where I kind of developed a heart for mentoring. And I've traveled everywhere to talk in schools, wherever I can. I will share my story, because I don't feel like I'm that typical athlete that you see on the telly, that, you know, it's not been plain sailing for everyone, but in terms of life's adversities, there's so many different layers to my story that we can't even cover today. But if people can hear just a bit and, you know that when I'm on that track, it literally means everything to me, because I have given everything to be there. But also, you know, for young Black girls as well, I did a photo shoot with a friend in Brixton, and she, you know, we didn't know each other before, we just connected with social media. How amazing is that? And it was about dual nationalities. And so obviously I was representing GB and Nigeria. So I was the African Eagle that day. And she was just saying, I used to always watch you and just want you to win because I saw myself in you. And that was so powerful to me, because I just, you know, sometimes athletics can just make you so caught up in yourself, and you feel the pressure of having to win and all this stuff, but you never know whose eyes are on you and who you're supporting and who you're strengthening. And I just thought, wow, people identify with me. And for so long, you know, the British system says, you know, 800-meter runners aren't that big and aren't that muscly. So I'm there trying to prove that actually there's so many girls that related to exactly how I looked. So I needed to make sure I was embracing that and showing them that I was proud of that. And that's just, you know, kind of what I try and step out on the track and do it every day. And in schools now as well, the image discussion of body images is just mad, and why girls don't want to participate in sport. And the amount of girls that are like, oh my gosh, miss, you're still really pretty. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? Because I do sport, I can't be pretty. And they're like, oh my gosh, you know, you wear weave and your nails are nice and look at your muscles. And I'm like, yes, look at my muscles. This is what I work with. This is what I've been blessed with. And you just got to embrace it. I've got one life and one body, and it's done amazing things for me. So if I can give them confidence because they see my confidence, you know, that is amazing to me.
And having like young girls look up to you, especially girls of color, especially nowadays when, you know, there's still such a struggle to find that representation in the media in terms of positive Black female role models. So having young girls come up to you and say that, you know what, you've actually inspired me to love myself, to be who I am. Like, how does that make you feel when you hear that?
It makes me feel like you know, I'm doing the will of God and my purpose, it gives me a strength to keep going, because I wouldn't say I'm like just that person that's like gym crazy and training crazy. Training hurts. It's not that fun. But I feel like there's a reason, and it's so I can, you know, deliver on performance day, and that is my platform to reach so many people. So when people feed back to me how I make them feel, it really just fills me with joy, because I know that's going to be a lasting effect that I'm leaving, and they're going to remember it, and it's going to affect some sort of change in their life. So it's almost like it's worth it. There's been so many days where I myself have not been feeling great, and I've had a speaking engagement or I've had a day at school, and I get there. I just remember going to one school in Greenwich, and I walked in and they were like, it's Marilyn Day. And honestly, that just lifted my spirit. I was exhausted. I was pretty depressed at the time. But sharing my story and my testimony, it almost strengthens you and reminds you. I always go back to the beginning. I remember where I started, and then you get to reflect and see how far you've come. So I think that's just so, so important. And whenever I'm struggling, I just remember, you know, just the streets and how tough it was, and, you know, just it being a distant memory, winning a medal, and now to look back and think, wow, I'm an Olympic medalist, I've got world championship medals, you know, it's really powerful. And then being able to take others on that journey, and then being able to, you know, support them in their goals, or just inspire them to dream as big as they want, because it doesn't matter. Like, I know, you know, today there's stuff that I want to achieve. Like, if I look in my bank account now, I can't afford it, but I know there's a will, there's a way, and it's simply just persevering, tapping into your network, working your socks off, and anything can happen if you just don't give up.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about now last few years essentially. So I know in 2016 you were retrospectively given a bronze medal for the 2008 Olympics. Could you tell us a bit about that? Like, how did you feel after you got the call? Like, what was your thoughts, your mood after getting?
Yeah. So earlier I was telling you, you know, how excited and how amazing that is. Still my favorite championship ever, to go to my first Olympics. So in the 800 I came out the semi-final stage, but in the 4x4 we came 5th on the day, which was a little bit surprising to us, because the year before we were bronze medalists from the World Championships. Okay. So we were a bit like, oh my gosh, like we at least expected another bronze. But I was elated coming back from that anyway. So imagine, gosh, we found out 2016, we didn't get the medal till 2018, because there's a lot of a process that they have to go through, testing the athletes again and getting it ratified. And it's actually the 3rd medal I've got back like that. And that was the one, at that time it was the 2nd, because after that I got another one. But that one really hit me emotionally, because almost, you know, there was so much stuff that comes out from having an Olympic medal, and all these opinions suddenly, you know, I had been off the scene a little bit with injury, and I just had these people going, you know, sort of complimenting me and wishing me well. And I was like, where have you lot been the last 2 years where I've been struggling? I remember getting kicked off funding and being told I'm not an Olympic medalist, so I'm not deemed, I don't meet the criteria anymore. So there's a lot of attacks to your confidence that happens when you're on a down, and then suddenly you get this medal, which I should have had 10 years ago. How different would my life have looked? You know, you get so much confidence off a medal going into a next season, going into your training, your mindset just changes. Yeah, I'm a medalist. So I stood on that podium. It was actually really lovely that we all got together. We wore our original uniform, and it was in the Olympic Stadium in Stratford. So my mum was there, so many people that probably would never have been in China were there to see me get the medal. And I just remember Jeanette Quatchi interviewing and just asking how I felt, and I just burst into tears, because I was so, it was a mixture of excitement and happy and redemption, but also I was really angry that moments had been stolen, you know. But, you know, as people of faith, we believe delay is not denial, and it was about, what am I going to do with this now? And it gave me that little push I needed to keep running, because I feel like my work in track is not done, and I want to leave the sport with a good taste in my mouth, and just showing people that, you know, just keep fighting for your dreams. And I believe like God's got something in store for me still, which is why I moved up to Wigan and I'm still going. But, you know, there's a lot that goes into it that you just don't see. I think a lot of people just assume you go to championships and you should come out with a medal. It's really difficult to, one, make the team, and then you're competing with, the thing with athletics, it's like the scope of athletes that can be there is from all over the world. So it's really not easy to make the first, second, third round. Like, to be a finalist is a big deal. So I'm determined to really maximize that medal. And, but what it did tell me was that all along, I've always been good enough. I've always been one of the best at my game and what I do. So it gives me confidence to just always keep working hard. Your character is who you are when no one's watching, and just keep doing the right thing, because sport is a really difficult industry. There's so much, there's so much going on behind the scenes. And one thing I can definitely hold my head up to is that I've always kept my integrity and just done the right thing, whether it's cost me billions of pounds or not. I just always will do the right thing.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Marilyn.
Thank you. You're a brilliant journalist.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for watching. I'm Savannah, and you can keep up to date with the London Borough Culture team using the @LBOC2020 on both Instagram and Twitter. You can also find Marilyn Okoro using the handle @thegirl_Okoro. Keep watching Brent Locked In, because we have a remarkable lineup of interviews planned for you all, talking to some pretty inspirational figures from Brent who are lucky enough to call this borough their home. Next week, I'll be speaking to a teacher from Alberton named Andrea Zakirafu, who was lucky enough to be awarded a Global Teacher Award back in 2018 for all her contributions to education.